The message wasn't meant for me. That's the part I keep coming back to, even now. It wasn't written to wound me. It was just the truth of what she'd been thinking, typed out fast on a Wednesday morning when she assumed I was still upstairs. She meant to send it to her sister, except she didn't. She sent it to me. I was in the kitchen already, second cup of coffee cooling on the counter, when my phone buzzed on the table. My wife's name on the screen. I almost didn't open it right away. We weren't the kind of couple who needed to be in constant contact. She'd sometimes leave before I came down. A text at 7 in the morning didn't mean much. Then I read it. The graduation dinner Friday is just us, real family. Don't say anything to my husband. He'll make it into a whole thing. The boy's father is flying in and I want it to be nice. I read it twice, then a third time. The coffee maker beeped behind me, letting me know it had finished a pot that nobody was going to drink. My wife walked in from the back porch 30 seconds later, newspaper tucked under her arm, still in her robe. She looked at me. I looked at her. I don't know what my face was doing. Whatever it was, she didn't notice. "Morning," she said, and opened the refrigerator. "Morning," I said back. I turned the phone face down on the table and finished my coffee standing up. 12 years. That's how long I'd been in that house on Birchwood Court in Roanoke. I bought it in 2001, 3 years before I met my wife at a church picnic on a late August Saturday that smelled like cut grass and charcoal. She came with a smile that made the whole afternoon feel quieter somehow, and a 16-year-old son who watched me the way teenagers watch something they're not sure they trust yet. I didn't rush it. I'd learned by then that you can't rush something that matters. You just keep showing up until people start to believe you intend to stay. Her son's father had been out of the picture since the boy was 9. Not disappeared entirely, not legally gone, just absent the way some men learn to be absent. A phone call on birthdays sometimes. A card at Christmas that arrived late or not at all. My wife had done everything alone for 7 years before I walked into that picnic, and when she told me that, standing at the dessert table with a paper plate going soft under her potato salad, I thought, I can help with this. I want to help with this. And I did. I paid for the SAT prep course in 2007 when my wife's hospital cut her hours. I bought the used F-150 when her son got his license. Nothing flashy, just reliable, which was what he needed. When he got into Virginia Tech, I drove him up myself, helped carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs, and shook his hand at the bottom when we were done. He didn't hug me back. That was fine. I hadn't earned a hug yet, maybe, but I showed up. 4 years of tuition payments, split between my wife and me, except she lost her benefits the second year, and the split became 70% mine without anyone saying so out loud. I didn't say it either. I just adjusted the automatic transfer and kept going. I co-signed the apartment lease in Richmond when his credit history was too thin. I covered the gap when his first engineering job started 2 weeks later than the lease did, and he couldn't make the security deposit. "You're good to him," my wife told me one evening after her son called from work to say he'd passed his professional licensing exam. She was cutting vegetables and she stopped to look at me. "You're really good to him." I didn't answer right away. I just said, "He's worth being good to." I meant it. After I read that text, I went to work. I teach adult continuing education at the community college, mathematics mostly, some remedial algebra, the occasional business math section. I've been doing it for 9 years since I retired from the county engineer's office, and I like it because the students are there by choice. Nobody makes a grown adult drive to a Tuesday night algebra class. That means something to me. I got through my morning section without incident. I graded papers during my break. I ate lunch at my desk. My phone buzzed 3 times. My wife, each time, I let them go to voicemail. By the time I drove home that afternoon, the text had settled into something heavier than hurt. It had become information. A man does math when his feelings get too complicated to hold all at once. Real family. His father is flying in. Don't say anything to my husband. I thought about the graduation ceremony. 2 days away. I had already pressed my blue blazer. I had already bought a card and written something in it that I meant. I thought about my wife's son, 28 now, a structural engineer working outside of Richmond, and how I had watched him cross a stage once before for his high school diploma in a gymnasium that smelled like floor wax and old sneakers. He'd looked out into the bleachers and found his mother first. Then he'd found me. He hadn't waved, but he had nodded. One nod, brief and small. I had lived off that nod for years. Now his father was flying in from Phoenix, and I was not supposed to know about the dinner. I pulled into the driveway on Birchwood Court and sat in the truck with the engine off for a while. The maple in the side yard had gone orange around the edges. Good tree. I'd planted it myself the fall after we got married, when the yard was nothing but clay and crabgrass. My wife had suggested it. Plant something, she'd said. Makes it feel like yours. I'd planted it, and it did. I went inside and started dinner. My wife came home at 6. She seemed fine. That was the part that turned everything sideways. She seemed completely, genuinely fine. She asked about my day. She told me about a scheduling problem at work. She ate the chicken I'd made and complimented the seasoning. She did not mention the text. She did not mention Friday's dinner. She did not mention that the boy's father was flying in. I let her talk. I answered what needed answering. Around 8 o'clock, I told her I had some grading to catch up on and excused myself to the spare room. She kissed me on the cheek. I closed the door behind me. The filing cabinet in the corner of that room had been mine since before the marriage. Gray metal, 4 drawers, the kind that screams when you open the second drawer too fast. I'd been keeping records in it since I was 30. My father taught me that. Keep your papers. Keep everything. A man who keeps his papers is a man who can prove what's true. I found the tuition receipts in the 3rd drawer, 4 years of them, sorted by semester. The car insurance records from when my wife's son was 19 and a fender bender cost me $1,100 and 3 hours on the phone with the claims office. The apartment co-signed paperwork, the deposit transfer confirmation from his first year in Richmond. I sat back in the chair and looked at the stack in my lap. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something closer to arithmetic. I put everything back, went to bed, and lay there listening to my wife breathe in the dark until my own breathing slowed to match it. The next morning I drove to see my old friend Sherman before work. We go back to the county engineer's office. He retired 2 years before I did and spends most of his time now tending a garden that's honestly gotten out of hand. He was pulling something up by the roots when I pulled into his driveway. He's 71 and moves like a man who stopped being in a hurry about 15 years ago. I've always thought that was the smartest thing he ever did. I told him enough, the text, what it said, who it was meant for. Sherman pulled off his gloves and looked at the dirt on them. She's been writing you out of the story for a while, he said. That text is just the first time you saw the rough draft. I didn't say anything. There was nothing useful to say to that. What are you going to do? He asked. I don't know yet, I said, but I'm going to do something. He nodded once, like that was the right answer, and put his gloves back on. I did not go to the graduation ceremony. I called the college that morning and said I had a scheduling conflict. My wife didn't question it. She kissed me goodbye and told me to rest, that these things were long and I'd be bored. She was looking out for me, she said. She seemed to believe it. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table in that quiet house and thought carefully about what I actually owned. The house on Birchwood Court was mine. It had always been mine. I had bought it outright in 2001 and refinanced once, in 2009, in my name alone. My wife was on the deed now as a joint tenant. We had added her name after the wedding, at her request, and I had done it without hesitation because that is what you do when you mean it. But the original purchase, the 12 years of equity I had built before she moved in, all of that was mine in a way that a document could explain clearly. I drove to see my attorney that afternoon. I had used him for a property dispute years ago, a fence line disagreement with a neighbor, and he had been thorough and unhurried. I liked that about him. He told me what I had. He told me what was possible. He told me to move deliberately, not from anger. I'm not angry, I said. He looked at me the way lawyers look at people who say that. I mean it, I said. I'm past angry. I want to do this correctly. He said he could help me do it correctly. Friday night, my wife came home late, cheeks warm, the good kind of tired. She told me the ceremony had been beautiful. She said her son had looked handsome in his robes. She said his father had flown all the way from Phoenix, and it had meant so much to the boy to have him there. She told me about the restaurant, what they had ordered, what his father had said in his toast. She told me all of it, like she was sharing something with me, like I would be glad for her. And the whole time she talked, I sat across from her and thought, she doesn't know I know. She doesn't know I have spent 3 days doing math and making calls and sitting with this in the quiet of that spare room. She doesn't know I have already begun to understand, very precisely, what the house on Birchwood Court means and what I am allowed to do with it. I nodded where a nod was needed. I said, "Sounds like a good evening." She went to bed first, the way she always did on Fridays. I stayed up. I turned the kitchen light off and sat in the dark for a while. Not grieving exactly, more like reading the room, taking in the particular silence of a place that has been yours for a long time, trying to understand how much of it you're still willing to carry. I called the realtor on a Monday. Her name was Patsy. She had sold a house 2 streets over the previous spring, and I had seen her signs in the neighborhood long enough to know she moved things without drama. She answered on the second ring. "I can come by Thursday," she said. "Thursday works," I said. My wife was working Thursday. I walked through the house with Patsy and kept my hands in my pockets. She tapped walls and checked windows and asked about the roof and the HVAC. At the end, she stopped in the front hallway. "Your wife knows about this?" she asked carefully. "She lives here," I said. "The deed has a process." Patsy was smart enough to leave that alone. She told me what the house would move for. She said the market was steady, that she had a couple in mind already, a young family, pre-approved, relocating for work. She thought they'd move fast if I wanted fast. "I want right," I said, "not slow, but right." We shook hands at the door. The offer came in 11 days. The couple wrote a personal letter, both engineers, as it turned out, wanting a yard, good schools, somewhere with a maple tree in the side yard that looked like it had been there a while. I signed the closing papers on a Tuesday afternoon. My hand didn't shake. I wasn't sure what that meant about me, but I noted it. I had told my wife the Friday before. Not a fight, not a speech, just the facts delivered at the kitchen table where we had eaten 10 years of breakfasts. I told her what I had done and why. I told her I was not doing it from spite. I told her the house had been mine before she arrived and it was mine to decide about. I told her she had 4 weeks before closing. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You saw the text." "Yes," I said. "It wasn't meant to hurt you." "I know," I said. "It was meant for your sister, but I'm more concerned with what it meant than who it was meant for." She wanted to go back through things, reframe things. She mentioned everything I had done for her son in a tone that suggested I was now trying to collect on it. I let her say it. I did not interrupt. When she finished, I said, "I didn't pay for those things to be owed something back. I paid for them because I thought I was part of a family. But when the phrase real family doesn't include me, then I need to reconsider what I was actually a part of all along." She didn't answer that. Her son called me 2 days later. I answered on the third ring. He didn't yell. I had half expected yelling. Instead, he was quiet in a way that was harder to sit with. "I didn't tell her to exclude you," he said, "from the dinner. My dad being there felt complicated. I didn't know how to say that to you." "You didn't have to hide it," I said. "You could have said it was complicated. I'm a grown man. I can handle complicated." Silence on his end. Then, "You shouldn't have sold the house out from under her." "She didn't sell the house," I said. "I did. It was mine to sell." Another pause. "I know it was." That admission, small as it was more than I expected. I didn't rush to fill the silence with gratitude. I let it be what it was. My wife filed a challenge. My attorney had prepared me for the possibility. We sat in a mediator's office on a Thursday morning, me on one side of the table, my wife and her attorney on the other. The mediator was a retired family court judge with reading glasses on a lanyard and the patience of a woman who had heard most of this before. My wife's attorney argued that the house had become the marital home, that the sale lacked sufficient notice, that the equity represented shared investment. My attorney placed a folder on the table, 12 years of mortgage statements, the original deed, the 2009 refinance documents, 3 years before the marriage, the deed transfer showing when my wife's name had been added, 2 weeks after our wedding. The timeline was clear, and it was documented, and it was mine. The mediator read without rushing. My wife said, I gave 12 years to that house too. You did, I said. I meant it. Then how is any of this fair? I looked at her, not with satisfaction, not with the coldness some men would have brought to a moment like this, just straight. It's not about fair, I said. I built that house before you came. I maintained it. I kept the records and the receipts the same way I kept the receipts for everything else I paid for over the years. When you moved in, I put your name on the deed because I wanted you to feel like it was yours. But feeling like something is yours and owning it are different things. And I think we both know that somewhere along the way, you stopped treating this marriage like it belonged to both of us. She looked at the table. The mediator removed her glasses. The sale was conducted within the legal framework. The property history is well documented. There's no standing here to challenge it. She closed the file. We're done. Outside, the morning had gone warm. I stood on the steps of the building and breathed air that tasted like October. Leaves were spinning down from the trees along the sidewalk, slow and unhurried. I watched them for a minute. Then I walked to my truck. I'm renting now. A small place near the river, 2 bedrooms, a deck off the back that faces east, good light in the mornings. I kept the kitchen table from the house, the rocking chair my father left me, and the filing cabinet. A man keeps his papers. Sherman came for dinner about a month after everything was settled. We sat on the deck until the light was gone, talking about nothing urgent, his garden, the football season, whether the county would fix the road on his street before the first frost. When he was leaving, he stopped at the door. You doing all right? He asked. Better than I expected, I said. He nodded like that was a satisfactory answer, and he left. My wife's son called in late November. He asked if we could meet somewhere between Roanoke and Richmond. There was a diner off Route 11 that we had stopped at once, years ago, when I was helping him move into his first apartment. He remembered it. I thought that said something. We sat across from each other in a corner booth. The coffee tasted like it had been on the burner since breakfast. Neither of us mentioned it. I didn't know the tuition split changed, he said after a while, that the second year was mostly you. You weren't supposed to, I said. You needed to study, not worry. He turned his mug in his hands. He's got his mother's way of doing that when he's thinking. I don't know what I'm supposed to say, he said finally. You don't have to say anything, I told him. I'm not keeping a ledger. I never was. I just need you to know that what I did because I thought it was the right thing, not because I expected anything back. I know that, he said quietly. That's actually what makes it harder. I didn't have an answer to that. Some things you don't fix with an answer. You just let them sit between you until they soften on their own. We didn't hug when we left, but he shook my hand at the door and held it a beat longer than he needed to. That was enough, maybe more. The maple tree on Birchwood Court belongs to someone else now. I drove past once, about a month after the young family moved in. I didn't stop, just slowed enough to see that someone had set a pot of orange chrysanthemums on the front porch. The tree was doing what it does every October, turning at its own pace, taking its time about it. I have been thinking a lot lately about what it costs a man to stay quiet about the things that matter. Not the strategic quiet, not the kind I used when I was planning what came next. The other kind, the kind that stretched across 12 years of not quite saying what I needed to say, because saying it felt like making a demand on people who were supposed to love you without conditions. I learned something late, but not too late to be useful. The same way you can spend years building something solid, you can spend years building something hollow and not know it until one ordinary Wednesday morning when someone sends a text to the wrong number and the whole structure shows itself for what it was. I am not bitter about it. I want to be precise about that, because bitterness is just grief that gave up on trying to understand itself. What I am is clear about what I own, what I gave freely, and what I will not hand over again without knowing who I am giving it to. If you have ever been told you belong, right up until the moment it became inconvenient for you to belong, I hope this finds you. Knowing your own name on a deed is not selfishness. Keeping your records is not suspicion. And walking out of a room where people have been deciding who you are without you, that is not walking away. That is, finally, arriving somewhere you should have been all along. Thank you for being here with me tonight. Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them, and every voice matters. If this story stayed with you, pass it along to someone who needs to hear it. This is Voices of Uncle Walter, and I will see you next time.